Okay, so I'd just like to welcome all the candidates for the senatorial election. Before we start, I've just been asked by one of the candidates just to read out a short statement. Before we begin, candidate Anthony Lewis has asked me to say a few words on his behalf, which all other candidates are more than happy for me to do. As you may be aware, Anthony has aphasia, a speech and language disorder caused by a serious stroke 10 years ago. Anthony is taking a full part in the senatorial campaign, but his difficulties with language mean that traditional hustings format of questions without notice is not practical for him. So he will not be answering questions tonight. Aphasia is a condition that affects communication but not ability. He will be responding to questions online on his Facebook page, and is also holding a number of surgeries which are a better format for his particular disability. Anthony has asked me to thank you for your understanding. Okay then, so if we can start with our number one candidate, Sam MEZEC.
Friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. My name is Sam MEZEC and I've been the Deputy for St Helier No. 2 District for the last 4 years. I hope that I've shown in my time in the States that I'm a hard-working member who never shies away from asking tough questions and proposing alternatives when I think the government doesn't have it right. I fought from the backbenchers to improve the lot of low earners and the squeezed middle. I've opposed every government attempt to roll back public services and introduce stealth taxes, and I've successfully fought to implement my previous manifesto commitments on things like the living wage, equal marriage, and a crackdown on exploitative zero-hours contracts. I'm standing for Senator now because I want to play a positive and constructive role in the next government of Jersey to force to the top of the agenda for the next States Assembly the aim of improving the standard of living for all islanders. I don't want to shout from the sidelines. I want to be at the forefront of delivering change. And this election on the 16th of May is your opportunity to vote for change in the way that we do politics here in Jersey. Opinion poll after opinion poll shows that the public are not happy with the way the state's worked. And we have the lowest voter turnouts in Europe. Most of the people that I speak to feel like the last few years of government in Jersey have been characterised by a dysfunctional state, a lot of wasteful spending, and an over-reliance on UK consultants because no one in the States is ever held accountable for anything. But these are issues which feel like they come up election after election, and nothing ever really seems to change unless things actually get worse. Many of you in this room will have felt like over the last few years that life has got more difficult with things like the cost of housing going up, wages stagnating, or the strains on our public services. And worst of all, poverty in Jersey has drastically increased in those years. These are trends which can't carry on forever. The next government has got to do something to reverse these trends and set the island in the right direction. I'm standing for election alongside 17 other candidates on a joint manifesto, 33 pages long, with 10 key pledges which we know are deliverable and which will have a tangible impact on improving life for many islanders. We're not interested in personality politics. We only want to debate the issues and put forward what we hope you'll consider to be sensible solutions to the challenges that are facing Jersey. You might not like everything in that manifesto, but I hope that voters will see that there is a better way of doing politics, a way which is much more capable of meeting the aspirations of the people of Jersey and delivering a better government system for all of us, no matter what your political perspective is. If you want change, I hope that on the 16th of May, you'll vote for me, and I promise you that I will work absolutely tirelessly to try and make this a fairer island for all of us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sam. If we can now move on to GINO Rossini, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is GINO RISOLI. I'm married with 3 children, 2 of which are at university. I've always said to my children, whatever you do in life, you must follow what you enjoy. Every decision you make must be, you must pursue joy. And I start by saying that I'll follow that one of my hobbies is an understanding of human behavior. I study it. You know, I study religions, I study psychology. I've got a raft of authors I could tell you, but in 3 minutes I better crack on. Now, really, the direction of this island lies with you. 20 years ago, I first come to you and said to you that unless you re-establish the boundaries in your government, what I mean by that is making them accountable for what they're doing, you'll never change anything on this island. You just won't. And the key to change is financial accountability. Why? Because the detail of the spending is what your government is doing, not what they say they're doing. That's very important. You then have the ability to rid yourself of people who, I'm sorry, are just helping themselves. Without that clarity, you won't allow integrity into the system. That is #1 job that I'm going to deliver. Now, when it comes to politics, politics is the art of making what is unacceptable acceptable. In no other sphere of life do you have this mayhem. When you deliver a policy, when you write a policy, and you don't make it fair, it's like throwing a hand grenade into society. Immediately, you separate people. Immediately, people go into the offensive. The young have no idea what you're doing because the policies that are pursued are unfair. You know, that's why you have mental health problems. That's why people are obese. That is why your education system is no good. That is why your health system is no good. Now, I understand all these facets. I'm not just a coffee shop owner. I've studied this, and only you, listening to, you've just got to dig a little bit deeper to realise what I'm telling you is the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino. If we can move on to our next candidate, number 3, Frank LUCE.
Good evening, Sir Mary. My name is Frank LUCE. Thank you for attending this hustings tonight, and thank you for ensuring that your name be on the electoral roll, enabling you to vote. Your vote and how you vote has never been so important. We are facing a landmark election. You are going to shape the future of the next government for all islanders. You, the minority, are going to carry the apathetic majority into better government by your choice of candidates before you tonight. Never before has the gap between the government and the electorate been greater. Islanders are so appalled by the antics of the present sitting states members, they have turned their back on politics and have lost total faith and feel angry that their opinions are completely ignored by elected members once they get into government. Frankly, reading letters to the editor in the Jersey Evening Post should be made compulsory reading for all states members. The appalling success of low voting turnout since the war is testimony to the contempt Islanders have for standing government. The situation can only be reversed by better government made up of members who first and foremost listen to the people and shape their policies to make government inclusive to the electorate. Then and only then will the general public feel included, in touch, and this will result in a greater desire to vote. In the meantime, and for this most important election, your vote will speak for all islanders. Potential voters see the system of government in Jersey as bad. They want nothing to do with it. That was an opinion held by me. However, the present Assembly have horrified me to such an extent that I am now before you asking for your vote so that I may represent the thoughts, feelings and opinions of islanders in the Chamber itself. I want to have a strong and significant input in 2 long outstanding issues, the appalling hospital saga and the independent inquiry into the lifeboat power and personality struggle the present government does not wish to happen. To face in the Assembly the looming priorities of Brexit and population control, and ensure that agriculture and tourism are better supported to form a holy trinity of business sectors along with the finance industry. I want to work for a listening States Chamber that puts Irelanders first. For that I need your confidence and support and vote. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you, and I hope to meet you and be of service to you for the next momentous 4 years. For your ballot paper, the name is LUCE, Frank LUCE. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Marys. Good evening.
Thank you, Frank. If we can have candidate number 4, John Lafondre.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Lafondre. I've had the privilege of representing St Lawrence as deputy for the past 12.5 years, but tonight I'm seeking your support to receive an island mandate. Professionally, I'm a chartered accountant, which is very useful when dealing with expensive states projects, complex legislation, and large sums of expenditure. We need sustainable finances, and I'm not ignoring the many other issues we face as well: education, environment, youth, mental health, population, to name a few. But the money has to work first. And my job, if I'm elected, is partially to keep the costs down so that tax rises are kept to the minimum possible. Over the last 5 years, I've been doing more and more on an international basis, working with both the French-speaking parliamentary side, l'Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, and I also represent Jersey on the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. And in the context of Brexit, and as we face other external political pressures, it is critical that we promote the island, explaining why, for example, we are of benefit to the UK. What has happened in Parliament today just reinforces the point that we need to redouble our efforts on communicating our message and protecting our constitutional position to Parliament and the wider world. I've been with Laveau Housing Trust for over 20 years, giving me first-hand experience of the difficulties faced in providing social and sheltered housing on this island. Parto Jardin de Ho, just around the corner, is actually one of ours. I want us to be focusing more on first-time buyers. It has got to be about housing that people can live in. And I support the current review of the housing market, and I want to see houses and flats that people can treat as a home, not just something they use in passing. I'm hugely passionate about the proper implementation of public sector reform, finally getting rid of the silo mentality, but we need to be clear as to how it's being implemented. Changing the organisational culture is very important, but communication needs to be genuine and sincere. And as President of Scrutiny and Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, it's been a hard job holding ministers to account over the past 3.5 years. We've looked at things like the Finance Centre, the hospital and Brexit, and most recently a high-level look at population policy. Jersey is a beautiful island. I love our rural areas, and for how I've helped the farming side of things, please have a look at my leaflet. I value the parish community and the many benefits of the parish system. If we want to retain all that we believe is good about Jersey, we have to recognise the pressures on us, including housing and population. It is important that we have far better controls, but with some flexibility for business. We will need to grasp the nettle as to how we manage immigration, but firstly we must have good data on what is happening within our overall population. I have proven political and financial experience. Decisions I make are based on hard evidence. I look at the long term. I'm prepared to listen, and I will work hard to get to a solution. My pledge to you is that if you elect me, I will continue to work hard, to continue to challenge, and continue to act in the best interest of the island, and I hope you'll consider me for one of your 8 votes to centre. Thank you.
Thank you, John. If we can now have candidate number 5, Ian Gorse. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I stood for elected office to make a difference and to provide hope for the future. This election is very much about change. And as Chief Minister, I have steered our island through some of the most difficult economic and social challenges that we have faced. But over the course of the next 4 years, we will face challenges that will set our future as a community for many years to come. We've got the uncertainties of Brexit, we've got international uncertainty, and we've got the uncertainty of the EU. Of course, we've also suffered the effects of the global economic recession. And as Chief Minister and a father, I understand the effect that the Great Recession has had on family budgets. Jersey is a great place, and we have made significant progress right across our community. But I am not satisfied. There is more that I want to see achieved. And I have three main aims through this election. Firstly, effective economic leadership. That means protecting and building on the many good things that we find in island life, so supporting the businesses that are already here and encouraging improved productivity and digital diversification. Because our economic strength has not happened by accident. I will continue to represent Jersey's economy and way of life on the international stage, defending our reputation in the EU and elsewhere, promoting investment and trade. I want and have always wanted to ensure that all islanders share in that success. And secondly, improving the lives of islanders by building on what we've achieved so far. And I want to do more. That's why I'm proposing an Affordable Housing Commission, coming together right across the community to drive down costs and to increase supply. A refocusing of the competition regulator, driving down the cost of living. A building on the long-term care scheme, providing government support at parish level. And post the care inquiry, I'm proposing a new contract with children and young people. Thirdly, transformation of government and the civil service. We've started the reform of government. I've recruited a new CEO, but there is much more to do. We must focus everything that we do on serving the public and driving out waste. When we work together, we can achieve change and a better way. I stand for hope for the future so that you don't need to risk yours. I would appreciate one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. If we can now have candidate number 6, Lyndon Varden.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In November 2014, I was appointed Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, and since then I have worked on behalf of islanders to deliver a strong, sustainable growth across all sectors of the economy. Maintaining a strong economy is important, not only because it provides new jobs and career opportunities, but also creates the wealth required to help those in our community who find themselves in need. It also allows society to develop for the benefit of everyone. This evening I would like to talk briefly about the provision of affordable homes. And whilst there has been progress since 2014 with the delivery of over 250 new homes by Andium, with more on the way, and the acquisition of sites capable of delivering in excess of 900 homes, together with some much needed and very innovative parish schemes. In addition, the private sector is delivering about 300 new homes a year. But it's still not quite enough. It simply must be a key priority, a key target, in fact, for the next States Assembly to increase the supply of homes, at least in line with demand, if we are to continue to make progress. The stumbling block for so many young people aspiring to home ownership is, of course, the cost, especially raising a deposit. So in addition to addressing the supply, there must be greater efforts made to help islanders onto the housing ladder by introducing more help-to-buy schemes, and these should include deposit loans, shared equity, and equity release opportunities. We must also exploit new construction methods with new materials aimed at driving down prices and improving environmental standards whilst reducing home running costs. There are currently at least 1,000 households in the rental sectors looking to purchase affordable homes. And if we can help to facilitate this and release housing stock in the rental sectors, then we will create a more consistent supply, which should stabilise pricing and improve standards across all categories of housing. Ladies and gentlemen, you may hear many negative comments from candidates this evening. And yes, we do have many challenges ahead, but we do have strong foundations, and we need to strengthen those foundations further if we are to deliver a secure future. And to do that, we will need to elect capable people. People with vision, highly experienced people with a good track record in life who are committed to attaining that goal and working together for the benefit of all islanders. And I ask you, please, ladies and gentlemen, to bear that in mind when you cast your votes on Wednesday, the 16th of May. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyndon. If we can now have candidate number 7, Gerald Baudin.
Monsieur le Procureur, Commissioners of Mary, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm Gerard Baudin. Now, we're told our government wants to build on what it's done and wants to do more. Well, I'd rather they didn't, actually, because I've had rather enough of these achievements. I actually call them failures. The new hospital, the Condor contract, refusal to control population, use of expensive consultants, 0-10 tax where we're losing £100 million a year, useless computer systems across the states costing millions. The list is endless. And why does everything we do have to be world-class? Because it seems to me the only thing that's world-class is the cost of the project. Ministerial government has been a disaster. Purported to save money and produce better decisions. It's done the opposite. Every day another disaster, another overspend. And the point is no one ever seems to be accountable. Under the previous committee system, each member worked on several committees, ensuring the states worked as a team, and every member's talents were used to the full. We didn't have a chief minister's department costing 20 million. We didn't need expensive consultants or spin doctors, people employed at our expense to mislead us. Now, I could stand here and talk about change, how I'm going to rejuvenate tourism and help agriculture and reduce poverty and a host of other things. But I'm not going to, and you won't find it in my manifesto. Because any candidate who promises those things is actually misleading you, because unless they become a minister, none of those pledges can be delivered in our present system. Yes, I do have views, obviously, on those subjects, but I would be dishonest to pretend I could deliver them. Ministerial government, with ministers sitting on the top floor of Civil and Markham House as far away from the public as they can get, with all other members sidelined, is dysfunctional. We need a more inclusive system. I have the experience for senatorial office, 40 years running my own business, 13 years as a states member where I served on the Telecom, Housing and Public Services Committees. I later served on the Shadow Scrutiny Panel, the Planning Applications Panel. I was Vice Chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel, member of the Privilege and Procedures Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Law Revision Board and various working parties. If elected, I promised to drive not only reform of ministerial government, but also address immigration control. We have to reintroduce work permits and a suitable qualification period. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. If we can now move on to candidate number 8, Simon BRÉE. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Simon BRÉE. I'm proud to be a Jerseyman and honoured to be the Deputy for St Clement. I'm Chairman of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel, the Future Hospital Review Panel and the Machinery of Government Review Panel, and Vice Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I've been working hard on your behalf to hold this government to account. There are major issues facing our island, which will have a direct impact on the daily lives of every one of us. Unless we tackle these now, our quality of life on our island will change forever. Brexit is looming, with its unknown impact on our economy. The finance industry is vital to our economy and continuing prosperity, but we must diversify our economy and support farming, tourism, the digital sector, small businesses and startups, so as to reduce reliance on the finance industry. Population growth, if left unchecked and uncontrolled, will have serious consequences on our quality of life. Work permits, which are seasonal and time-limited, are the only solution. Families looking to buy their first home are finding it impossible. Government must support parishes in delivering small-scale, affordable home developments to give islanders hope for a better future. Much sooner these than large-scale developments of concrete and steel. We must reduce the burden on middle to low-income families by reducing the cost and size of the public sector. This does not mean reducing services, and simply raising taxes and charges is not the answer. Removal of GST on food and children's clothing would be a step in the right direction. And government must stop wasting your money. £28 million on a new hospital without a spade being put in the ground. £800,000 on an aircraft registry with just one aircraft to show for it. Countless millions spent on UK consultants, with more spend just announced by the new chief executive. Politics in Jersey has become polarised. It is time to regain the middle ground. It is time to have a government that has a social responsibility and is not just some uncaring, soulless corporate entity run by grey-suited accountants whose only concern is balancing the books. It is time to have a government that is committed to protecting and upholding the customs and traditions that make Jersey unique and wonderful. It is time to have a government that listens to all the people, not just big business. It is time for new political leadership. It is time for your voice to be heard. Your vote is your voice, but change will only happen if you do vote. This election offers you a real opportunity for change. To the role of Senator, I bring my work and life experience, my political experience, my strong work ethic, and my courage to stand up for what I believe in. Working together, we can make a real positive difference to the lives of every member of our society. I would be honoured to receive your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. If we can now have candidate number 9, Phil Maguire.
I was told off last night by a member of the Reform Party as we were discussing politics. I was telling him why I didn't join the party and what differences of opinion I had about it. And I said, I disagree with the idea that we have a polarised society between the haves and the have-nots. My belief is that what we have is a society engineered to turn the haves into have-mores by stealing from the have-nots. That we don't have poverty, we have created poverty by our system of caring and uncaring and callous society. We have denied, dispossessed, disinherited and deprived people from being full members of our society. Now, my opinion is that when you do have a society where you exclude some members to the benefit of others, it eventually has to hurt everyone, because if you exclude somebody, you exclude everyone, and we all become expendable. And when I said this, he told me off. He said, Phil, you're not making this message clear when you go to Hustings. You need to use these exact words to get this message across. Well, he may have a point, although I have used those words many times before in the last 10 years about our society. I haven't used them in this particular campaign, so I may have been unintentionally pussyfooting around the issues, in which case I do apologise if I have. But there is one point where I really do differ with the Reform Party, and that is that I believe that a more humane society shouldn't cost more. In fact, I argue that it should cost less. I argue, in fact, that that's the way that we have organised our society, where we spend so much money in waste, is actually hurting people. In other words, even if you don't care whether we have a humane society or not, you should care because it's hurting your pocket. Let me give you an example of the kind of thing where we could save more money if we were just a little bit more humane. One of the standing members of the states on this stage told us the other night about how he got a consultant in for £13,000 to listen to people, and he thought it was money well spent. I think it's a sad indictment on our government when we have to pay people to listen to the public. I think we've missed out there. And if we promote a more sensible and more just form of society, we wouldn't have to pay such things. So I'd like to give you a simple thing to leave you with. What kind of society do you want? Do you want a more expensive, callous society where it's going to grind you underneath the wheels if you stumble? Or do you want a cheaper, more humane society where we give people a hand up? Choose carefully.
Thank you, Phil. If we can now move on to candidate number 10, Sarah Ferguson.
Good evening, St Mary. It is suggested that we must have unlimited immigration to have a sufficiently large working population to support the ageing population. The proposed policy is that immigration should not exceed the average of that since 2001, 700 people a year. That means by 2035, we will require 185 Le Marais blocks and 6 new primary schools. Where will we house them? We need more sites in the villages to give the children of parishioners a chance to live in their home parish. The new island plan gives us the chance to identify sites. We must develop the amended and proposed migration policy as well, urgently. We need a joint effort by farmers, utilities and the community to clean up our water. Farmers have started reducing their use of chemicals, and some are experimenting with regenerative farming. The indications from the results are promising. Reduced costs, reduced need for staff, better quality, earlier crops, and better drainage of fields. Howard Davis Farm was originally an educational and research station for agriculture. It's time to bring it back into that role. We have a hemp farm, a vineyard, trial tea plantations, so what else can we grow? We talk about improving skills for the 21st century. Interestingly, one resident has actually done something about it. Our primary schools are now all kitted out with modern computers, better than the ones in the States. Courses are actually being adapted for children to self-teach, and from what I hear, they are racing ahead. Catch them early. Don't wait until after they leave school. And let us not talk about the problem of the aging population. That's rubbish. Who is looking after the children in the holidays? The grandparents. Who is doing much of the volunteering in the island? The aging population. Who is doing much of the caring in the island? The aging population. That is, when they're not climbing Kilimanjaro, hiking through the Pampas, or trekking across Iceland. It is time we stopped calling them a problem and paid more attention to the way they're being treated. You will hear many promises in this election. Please ask, how much will it cost and who will pay? We need change desperately, but we need prudence in spending. Please vote for Sarah Ferguson, for change with common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. If we can now move on to candidate number 11, Stevie Ocean.
Good evening. Is it working now? Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be here in St Mary's. 2 years ago, when I stood in the senatorial by-election, I had an objective, and that was to remove the letters UK from our 5 islands. That was achieved after 2 days of talking to the Americans and really telling them that we are nothing to do with the UK whatsoever. Other things have happened. Basically, on my manifesto, unfortunately, I was unable to fit it into the booklet for the simple reason it comes out of 1,000 words, and it was a maximum of 500. I've got extended copies here if you'd like to pick them up, a few which I've actually printed off. 2 points on this. First of all, grammatically, I've made it easy for everybody to read. I've taken everybody into account that has problems with reading. And secondly, it's in capitals for the simple reason that people have eyesight problems. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about, first of all, how I've made history by changing the ballot paper. It was confusing back in 2016. And I put this through to a government department. They represented me in front of the law officers. And after my equity card was shown to a law officer, it was decided that I'm not Peter Mac. And so that changing the law, the whole format of the ballot paper has completely changed, and it's simplified. There's no excuse that anybody makes it any confusing entry whatsoever. At the moment, I'm actually in talks with LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, re-educating them about the Channel Islands as well. We are nothing to do with the UK whatsoever. If I'm elected, I don't intend to sit on the back benches. I intend to be a major player in the States Assembly. That is something I'm prepared to do. If you want to pre-vote, don't forget you can go to St Paul's Centre between 8:30 and 5:15 every night, and make sure you take some ID with you. So what else can I talk about roughly? Well, basically, at the end of the day, I don't make promises and I don't make pledges. I'm a man of action, and that's one thing. So if you want to vote on May the 16th, vote for Ocean Stevie. and I will get things done for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stevie. If we can now move on to candidate number 12, Moz Scott.
Good evening, St Mary. I'm an Oxford graduate, a former tax specialist, and a qualified Jersey lawyer. I have been a partner, owner and director of a major local law firm and trust company with over 800 employees. More recently, as a leadership trainer, I have helped organisations change for the better. I know how to use teamwork to get results and how to help others to do so. Change in this island cannot be avoided, with most of the Council of Ministers having abandoned ship. But change can be an opportunity to move forward. Even Brexit may turn into an opportunity to prosper, provided this island is prepared to change. I'm not an established politician who has taken the island's economic strength for granted. Having contributed towards this strength, it's hard to have witnessed established politicians allowing the waste of huge sums of public money while not making better use of this island's limited resources. My skills are easily transferable. I have studied the island's constitutional independence and scrutinised its laws. In my voluntary role as chairman of the St Brellard's Bay Association, I have learnt more about the shortcomings of the island's planning policies than most states members. If elected, I will work towards ways of stopping the waste of public money, towards cutting red tape, and on making taxation fairer and more efficient. These and other measures to make Jersey's economy sounder and more productive, because we need funds to help those in need, not more taxes. We need more funds for affordable housing, not another quango that lacks leadership. And I'll work towards a better partnership between government and the business and voluntary sectors, and for policies that deliver results. To support affordable housing, to put more effort into protecting the island's scenic beauty, reservoirs and heritage, and to invest in education and training in a way that equips younger islanders for a secure and promising future in which the island's special identity is preserved. Most importantly, if elected, I will deliver a proposition to reform the State's Assembly to make it better value for you, the voter and taxpayer. Part of it will ensure ministers are better equipped for independent thinking and act as a team with scrutineers to deliver the results you actually need, because it's not only the culture of the civil service that needs to change. I'm standing as Senator because I wish to offer my skills, knowledge and experience for the benefit of all islanders to help deliver the change we all need. So this is all I can deliver in the time allowed to speak. Please look at my online manifesto at www.votemods.je to find out how, if elected, I will deliver much, much more to you. So please consider me for one of your votes as Senator on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Moz. So if we can now move to candidate number 13, Gordon Troy.
Good evening, St Mary. I'm Gordon George Troy, educated at De La Salle College. I'm from a business and politically motivated family that are passionate about our island because we love it. I would appreciate your vote, and so that I may have the honour and the privilege of serving the people of Jersey. If elected, I want to bring propositions to the House to 1. Introduce a livable pension for senior citizens. 2. Make housing available and truly affordable. 3. Introduce population controls and work permits. And 4. Peg GST at 5% and remove it from food items. And 5. I want to crush government financial waste. Mr. Gore's government has failed our pensioners, bringing hardship to many. I want pensions to increase to what I call the livable pension, so that pensioners can enjoy retired life. Pensioners created our economy and modern society. We owe them a debt of gratitude. I intend appointing a commission to look how we can improve every aspect of pensioners' lives, from pensioners' healthcare, from pensions to healthcare, from diet and exercise to well-being and community life. Since I bought my first home in 1977, there's always been a waiting list for young family homes of 1,000 to 2,000 people. Young family needs these homes, and to build them, government really must make some effort and do something. And if they do the following, which is: 1, government must allocate the land for appropriate small and large sites and apartment sites as well, because if there's no sites, there's no housing. 2, government must provide a low initial deposit purchase scheme for first-time buyers. 3, government must provide a mortgage payment scheme to fit the buyer's incomes and or tax breaks. 4, government must offer shared equity schemes. 5, government must remove user-pays planning charges from planning applications. If the user pays stays, it must be on planning applications that are approved only. The planning department gets money every time it says no to your new homes, and there's a million no opportunities in every planning application that's made. For the next 30 years, we have a difficult population demographic, as many of our working population retire. We must manage our population with a balanced approach to immigration control. Work permits, short and long term, are essential, and we can then service our economy and provide staff for our industries. I want accountability for states' project spending. States members have caught a spending virus. The cure and medicine: make project 1 necessary, 2 value for money, 3 on time and on budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. If we can now move to number 14, Tracy Vallois.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have served as a States member for 9.5 years as a Deputy of St Saviour and as a Deputy of St John. I have carried out numerous roles during this time that have either influenced or directly impacted on policies and legislation. My roles have included Assistant Minister at both Education and Treasury, Chair of the Public Accounts Committee, President of the Scrutiny Chairman's Committee, and serving as a member or Vice Chair on a variety of topics right across the scrutiny roles. I have proven that I am able and willing to work with all members on all areas that have challenged and continue to challenge our island in a responsible and effective manner. Accountability and alignment of outcomes to plans has been lacking. Clear direction and professional approach to delivering for the public is problematic, therefore creates tensions and defensive positions. Question and challenge has a place in all walks of life, and it needs to become the norm, especially when trying to instill confidence back into the states on behalf of the public. At a time of uncertainty for both residents and business, we need a public sector and the political representatives who govern them to listen, lead and learn with honesty, integrity and respect. If we are to tackle the very difficulties that face us of Brexit, automation, working demographics, health and immigration, then we need to do things differently, and we need to start now. Innovation, competition and diversity is not just about issuing a lump sum of money. It is also about creating the right frameworks, addressing skills gaps with industries and the ability for people to reskill. An assessment and change to the role of user pays, subsidies, contributions and tax will enable a better alignment of policy to outcomes and assist islanders to reach their potential without facing further barriers. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen, and it can in Jersey, in partnership with you. My tenacity, love of Jersey, our future, and the well-being of our environment, community, and economy is why I would ask you to consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. If we can now move on to candidate number 15, Steve Pallett.
Good evening, Sir Mary. My name is Steve Pallett. I'm the Constable of St Brellards. In this election, I'm standing for Senator because I believe I have the energy, leadership and experience to play an active role in the island's next government. I believe there are a number of challenges that need addressing urgently if we are going to have a sustainable and successful future. This evening I'm going to focus on the need for affordable housing, future investment in education and a new active Jersey strategy. We simply don't have enough houses for our young people. To control immigration, we must encourage our young professionals back to the island by providing them with quality, affordable homes. I'm proud to have led a scheme at Lemoy that delivered 16 affordable homes for young people and equity for the parish. But we need to deliver it on a larger scale if we're going to encourage the return of our young people and restrict the need for inward migration. That is why I'm proposing that the next Council of Ministers find sites for 500 affordable homes as a priority. I want to be part of a government that doesn't just talk about affordable housing, but one that gets on and builds a home that our young islanders need now. But housing isn't enough. With increased automation, the world is becoming more competitive and challenging. Our education system must evolve and evolve fast if our next generation are going to fill an ever-increasing skills gap and plug the shortfall that is currently being filled by uncontrolled inward migration. Academic results are important, but so is the need for inclusivity within schools. Opportunities need to be provided for all children, irrespective of backgrounds. This is the only way we can address the inequality, particularly in our town schools. The Jersey Pupil Premium needs further investment, but we need to look at opportunities out of the classroom as well. Caring Cooks is one example of where our children can learn to grow and cook their own healthy food. This is vital now more than ever, because some of our children are suffering both physically and mentally from an education system that we simply must improve. We face a ticking time bomb with our healthcare. That's why I'm proposing a new active Jersey strategy. This will improve facilities and encourage children through to pensioners to be more active. It is this kind of strategy that will reduce chronic illnesses such as diabetes and heart disease and will ultimately reduce the burden on you, the taxpayer. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to address the challenges facing this island if we're going to have a sustainable future. The only way we can do this is by electing people who will work together to address issues such as population, housing and education. I like to think I've shown through my professional and political life that I'm willing to work with anybody to get the job done. If you consider me to have the energy, leadership and experience to serve as one of your senators, then please consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. If we can now move to candidate number 16, Christina Moore. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here this evening. As voters, you will always expect your state's members to make decisions based on facts, and quite right too. Tonight, I would like to talk to you about our environment and an active approach to preventative health. The facts that we have are that our environment is important to us all, and we need to improve it. Alongside the feeling of safety that we enjoy in our peaceful and friendly community, people have said in the Future Jersey consultation that they want to see the beauty of our country and coastline protected. This means improving water, air and soil quality, and of course being careful about where and how we build affordable homes. The next Assembly will debate the Island Plan. Now, although I've been a States member for 6.5 years, this will be the first time that I've taken part in such a debate. I don't dispute that we should have a long-term vision for the use of land, but every plan should have an element of flexibility. In my view, each parish should have a working group who, through consultation with parishioners, should be able to support or oppose certain developments that arise after the Island Plan has been agreed. A joined-up approach is needed in relation to those developments and their use of energy, including providing charging points for electric cars, which will also have a positive benefit for the air quality in our built-up areas. As you're all aware, St Mary has benefited from the cycle path through the valley. And I know the cost was controversial at the time, but it's an excellent example of a collaborative thinking that benefits us all. Most obviously, the path can help to reduce traffic congestion, another priority that arose out of the consultation. But there are also physical and mental health benefits of using active travel, which is why I would support a continuation of the e-bike scheme, perhaps going as far as encouraging hotels to offer them to visitors, and further investment to extensions to our cycle paths, particularly in the north and the east of the island. As Constable Pallett's told you this evening, encouraging an active Jersey is not just about developing sporting excellence, it's also about getting everyone active. That's why I support a simple scheme such as ensuring that every child takes part in the daily mile when they're at school. This encourages sporting confidence, reduces obesity, and also boosts attainment as the children taking part are noticeably more alert due to the regular exercise and fresh air. My campaign is about balancing competing priorities to find a better way and a sustainable future for the island. The economy is, of course, another critical part of that balance. The more successful it is, the more jobs are created, the more revenue we raise to provide healthcare, education and help to those in need. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you look for experienced and compassionate leadership, and I hope you'll choose more for Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I understand candidate number 17, Anthony Lewis, has prepared something already for us to listen to.
You have never seen a candidate like me before. I am different. I have a different campaign and a different voice, but different is what Jersey needs. My stroke has left me disabled, but it has given me courage, determination and new insight. I will represent those who, like me, don't have a voice. Not just the disabled, but everyone who feels that today's politicians don't speak for them. My focus includes the environment, equality, and community. We need to improve the community of Jersey. We need to improve the environment. It will cost money, but it is an investment for my children and your children. There is no clear voice for the environment in the current states. That has to change. Equality. I bring a new perspective, one formed by both success and hardship. I believe mental health provision must be higher up the political agenda. More understanding and reduced stigma. Where we see inequality and stigma in Jersey, it should be fought. We are improving and have more cosmopolitan living. To create a more equal island. The dangers of having an island of haves and have-nots. I believe that the most marginalized and downtrodden members of our society have something to contribute. From the inmate at Lemoy to the homeless man in the parade, we all have insights and abilities to help make Jersey a better place to live. Everyone has skills and talents. Everyone. We need a system that allows those talents to flourish. The first step is to break down our own stigmas. That is a role of education and defining common goals. Our children and their schooling hold the key. It is then identifying those abilities and channeling them where they are most needed. We need more social enterprises to create businesses and programs that build on our social capital. Like my campaign headquarters, the Beresford Street Kitchen. Communities working together makes us all stronger, and it starts at school. We also need greater recognition of support. The voluntary sector. With more effort from the states, we can better coordinate the work that charities do. I will be the first person with aphasia to stand for the states. I appreciate that makes me different. You may ask, how will I be able to represent you? With modern technology, I can. But for more information, please visit my website, www.andluce.com. I hope that I will be able to represent all islanders, including those who don't always fit in with the norm. You have 8 votes for senator. Please use one of those on someone who will truly represent change. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. That concludes the summary from all of the candidates, and we'll now move to the stage where you can actually ask your own questions. How we'll start this is we'll give priority to the parishioners and we'll ask 2 questions, and then we'll ask the candidates to go around the table and answer those 2 questions. So if I can have hands, please. Okay, well, I saw one go up straight away over there. So we've, have you got the microphone, Hannah? Just over there.
Is it working? Yes, it is. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it's not really a question, it's a request for the elected politicians and criticism for the previous politicians, with the exception of Senator Lyndon Farnham and indeed our parish constable. My name is Alan Muller and I live in St Mary and have been in business for over 35 years. I believe the island plan is to be updated in 2020 and the consultation process is about to take place or has started. With this in mind, please could you take the time to readdress some of these policies which do not cater for the majority of local people who wish to start up or run a business. For example, a small builder, a painter, a fisherman, a gardener, the list goes on. But because of the green zone, natural environment and various other policies, people are unable to get started. Where do these people go? I'm not suggesting we allow them to operate in open areas, but surely they can be housed in hidden away places. Do you as politicians only want the 11Ks and finance in our island, or are you prepared to help locals who want to start off in business? The big developers now build flats and houses with minimal storage and parking. For example, a one-bed flat with one park. I'm
sorry, Alan, we're going to have to keep it reasonably brief on the question. You nearly...
It's not a question, it's a...
Oh, it's a statement, yeah, but it's got to be a question. So do you want to summarise what question you'd like the candidates to answer?
I'd like to read out, but I'm not allowed to.
No, we can't do that. It's, yeah. Alan, we can summarise that as basically you'd like the candidates to answer a question around making sure that when you're looking at the consultation for the island plan, what would they do to make sure that local people were potentially given the opportunity to start up new businesses in the countryside, I think is probably what you're looking for. Sorry, can we take the next question, please? Yeah, I think we've got Simon at the back there in the red shirt.
Good evening. It's just one question. What are we going to do about 0-hour contracts? It's sad to hear that it's only Sam and I think maybe one other person out of all of you that bothered to mention this. It's being perniciously used in the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with 0-hour contracts for people who want to do them. But there is a vast amount of people out there, especially in the service industry, that do not want to be on them. They want to be on a 42-hour week. If they work 42 hours a week, they get taxed for that. You make more money. Susie Pinnell, she's not here tonight. I know she's deputy. Been in charge of this for quite a while. Nothing's been done. No legislation's been put in place. It's about time this was done.
Simon, so what we'll do is, so the 2 questions are, so if the candidates can just give us their feeling on making sure that when there's a consultation is going through for the island plan, that how are young local people looking when they're looking to set up a business, how they'll be helped in this process. And question number 2 is, I suppose very specifically, do we have an opinion on why maybe certain people are being forced to go on 0-hour contracts? If we can start with candidate number 6, Lyndon Farnham, please.
I thought if I kept my head down, you might start somewhere else. Thank you, Alan, for the question. The most important piece of work I think the next States Assembly will do, one of them at least, will be the new island plan. And whilst I'm reluctant to criticise, I'm going to. Some of our planning policies are ridiculous. And I spend most of my time attending meetings and trying to help people, usually people in business, usually people in agriculture, trying to get permissions to develop their relative area. We've also got to look very carefully at heritage issues. I can't start to go there, and I support heritage, and we must look after, we must guard our heritage very, very carefully. but sometimes we are far too overzealous.
Far too overzealous. Yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you. And so we need to work really hard to make sure the next island plan is something reasonable and deliverable and is much fairer and easier and less expensive. I'll stop there because I'm running out of time. Zero-hour contracts. There is a place for zero-hour contracts if they're used appropriately. If they're not used appropriately, I have no time for that. I think the perpetrators of misusing them should be dealt with heavily. I think there should be stiff penalties for people abusing 0 hours contract. But we must remember they do create a lot of jobs. Not everybody dislikes them. A lot of people find them very useful. So yes, there is a place for them, but they must be used appropriately. And employment laws, new employment laws, are providing more protection for employees. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move on to candidate number 7, Gerald Boda.
Thank you, Mr. Procurator. The island plan, I had quite a bit to do with the 2002 island plan, where my fellow St Clement Deputy and I discovered there was a raft of what we call secret sites, all little white dots all over the map of Jersey, where we could build 2 houses, 3 houses, 5 houses or something like that, and most of the State Assembly hadn't even noticed those. We brought it to the attention, and there was almost there was in fact a reference back on it. But it all hinges on immigration. The whole idea of the island plan is to find more fields to build on. And if we don't attack and get some proper controls on immigration, some work permits, and bring, I mean, we used to have a 20-year qualification period, and it became 10-year. Now it seems to be about 5 minutes. There's no point in keep building all the time when the queue at the end is just getting longer all the time. We address immigration. The island plan will be so much more conscious of the environment and what we want. 0-hour contract, you don't get holidays. There's no possibility of taking out a mortgage or anything because the work is so variable. It is certainly being abused. Companies, I believe, use it as a way of avoiding employment legislation. Frankly, except in exceptional circumstances, it should be outlawed. I mean, if I want to employ a gardener for a couple of hours a week or something, a 0-hour contract would be appropriate, not for somebody who's working every day of the week, week after week after week. That is being abused.
Thank you. If we can move on to Simon Bree.
Thank you. First of all, with regards to the island plan and how do small businesses and startups fit into that? Well, as I said earlier, I believe government really needs to support small businesses and startups. We have to diversify our economy. That has to be taken into account when we look at the island plan as to where can small businesses actually start? Where can they be set up? I'm against the wholesale development of greenfields. However, we have to be sensible and say there are 2 types of pressures going on here. Firstly, the population growth, we need more housing. So let's look at small-scale parish-type developments, not huge-scale ones, so that we will lose a certain number of small fields, but it will benefit the whole community. Historic buildings, the restrictions that are placed on those are utterly ridiculous. I know, I live in one. And I think the whole issue about our historic buildings needs to be looked at again. And there needs to be encouragements for small businesses to go into, say, farm developments, looking at how you can turn an old building into something new and beneficial to the community. 0 hours contracts, I think they should be banned, full stop. I disagree with them entirely. They have been abused by a large number of employers over the years who have got away with basically blue murder. The current Council of Ministers are to blame for the 0 hours contracts, not just the Minister for Social Security. If there was a will on the Council of Ministers to address this issue, it would have happened. The fact there was no will means it wasn't. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move to Phil Maguire.
We're already paying the price for not looking after our trades. After all, try and find a good plumber nowadays. And this is only going to get worse if we don't treat these trades seriously. The problem is that they're in competition for the same land as everybody else. And it's you either put a shed on a thing in order to store a few bits and pieces, or you put a house, and people are preferring to put houses. And eventually we are going to pay for it by saying, well, who's going to look after all these houses? Who's going to develop them? Who's going to build them if we don't look after the very trades that are doing that? So we do need to factor these people in. I'm probably going to be very unpopular here because I'm actually a fan of zero-hour contracts. Anything that allows people to get back into work and get used to work. Yes, they're abused because anything can be abused, but that doesn't mean that they are just wrong simply because some people abuse them, any more than using cars are wrong because some people speed.
Thank you. If we can now move to Sarah Ferguson.
Thank you. Yes, the island plan. I have worked with Moz on the St Brelade's Bay Association, where we try and keep the character of St Brelade's Bay for tourism, for locals, not just for immigrants.
And Dandara.
Absolutely, yes. I live next door to Zanzibar. We have a super bay, but everybody seems to want to live there in very large houses. But we do need, with the island plan, to identify sites where we can actually build, as everybody else is saying, but we can build particularly, as I have said before, for the children of parishioners who want to live in their home parish. Our real problem is that demand far exceeds supply. We've built 1,261 houses in the last 4 years, and the immigration was 4,200 people in the last 4 years. So we're just fighting over it. I've had fights with planning over plastic windows because I think they're unnecessarily rigid over this. You know, there is no reason why you can't have the plastic that looks like wood. And the planners seem to forget keeping new buildings to fit in their context. So again, you know, we need to tighten up on that. Now, 0 hours contracts, the bank they have for nurses in the hospital is first class because it means you can do your ordinary job, and if you want to do a bit more, that's fine. I went to see with an employment lawyer to talk to Social Security and their advisor, and they were apparently working on this, but I think we're going to have to beef them up on it because nothing seems to have come out. It needs an amendment to the employment law. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can have Stevie Ocean now, thank you.
Alan, the island plan. Well, first of all, I am 100% behind sole traders and business startups. As far as I'm concerned, this is something that I would look into if appointed into the States Chamber. 0 hours contracts. Now, where does that come from? Let me tell you, it probably comes from the UK, so why have we got to copycat everything they do over there? I'm 100% against these, and I think we should come up with a concept that is geared to our islanders. That's something I'm 100% behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can now move to Moscott.
Well, the island plan. I've heard somebody say that it's great having a flexible island plan, but not one as flexible as one we've got. I mean, I've been to planning meetings and I've had the same developer argue one set way on one set of policies and then another policies, and sure, that's fine, you're the developer, you must be right. It's ridiculous. We do need to review the green zone with the parishes, work out some proper areas to designate affordable housing. Some of that green zone land isn't really proper, isn't even used as farmland. And we need strict enforcement of designated areas. Stop making exceptions so that people can get around the rules. And when it comes to the local businesses renting commercial spaces, we have a bit of a problem with some unused property in the island, and my manifesto proposes to motivate people to not to actually release these more, to enable rents to be cheaper for trades. And indeed, we should look at the parishes at making more business parks available too. That's the opportunity that the review of the island plan gives us, if people understand the island plan, and I think a lot of people don't. The 0 hours contract, well, as Sarah and Phil have already said, these are things that actually suit some people, but not others, particularly where they're being abused. So I certainly do agree with regulating against abuse, but to just simply do away with them, you're forgetting we've got an ageing population. You're forgetting that some people may actually find that useful. But as I say, also social security review should help in terms of getting past that abuse. So, yeah, I don't want to do away with them completely. Thanks.
Thank you. If we can now go to Gordon Troy.
I think you've made a very good point there, and which has now been turned into a question of how small businesses start, and it is difficult. I've been in business all my life, and very often to find the right site to operate from, which is absolutely crucial to some businesses, is really important. And I think under this new island plan, that's certainly if I'm elected, I'm going to take very seriously what you've said, because if we don't have places for the plumbers and the electricians and the small businesses to store stuff and operate from, we are going to get ourselves in trouble. And it's one of the most important questions I've had since we've been doing this. Moving on to 0 hours contract. Well, in most cases, people want job security, but for many people, 0 hour contracts actually work very well. And providing it's not used as a tool by business to have an advantage over staff, I don't have a problem with it. And we have many students that come back from university, work 0 hours contracts, which really suits them, and some retired people do the same. So I'm not totally against it, but I think we've got to keep an eye on the control of how it's used and how it's implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we can now move to Tracy Valois, please.
Thank you. I think the island plan, as it's currently constituted, is a perfect example of how the states don't do policy very well. And it's the issue with it is it's very contradictory, and that it doesn't clearly set out the boundaries in which you can work within. And so I think with regards to the new island plan, there's a huge opportunity here for people to be involved. And I remember when I first came into the States, there was this report talking about keeping Jersey special. And it mentioned a three-legged stool, which is your economy, your social, and your environment. And we should be applying those principles to all the policies that we make. We should be providing that form of balance to understand the needs of those three areas to ensure that we have the right policy and it's clearly stated and people understand where they stand during that policy term. In terms of 0 hours contracts, like you stated, sir, some people like the flexibility of these. But on the other hand, of course, this allows some people to exploit the trust that's put in place of those 0 hours contracts. And I think some people can underestimate how difficult it can be for families who end up having to use 0 hours contracts and the problems and the issues that they face with social security because of the way that they are overzealous in terms of applying the strict rules around income support, and they're in and out, and it causes more stress on families. So if they're having to have a 0 hour contract, it's creating such insecurity for them, their family, their children. And if it is being exploited, then we have to legislate for it, just like we did with the rented dwellings law for minimum standards.
Thank you. If we can move to Stephen Pallett.
Alan, I think you pick on a really important point. It's issues that I think have been prevalent for decades. I think with startups, we've got new, I think, issues now with startups and how difficult they are with Class 2 contributions, ITAs and all the red tape. But going back to your point about startups, they are difficult. And I'm going back to when I first started back in 1981, trying to find premises then was almost impossible. I had a small business. If it hadn't been for Terry Lamar at the time fighting planning for me, I would have had to fold the business I had at that time. And it is difficult to find premises around the island. We do need to, I think, lighten up a little bit when startups are looking to use buildings that maybe are parts of farm complexes and things like that. Because it is difficult for, as was already said, some of our smaller businesses to find somewhere. The island plan, it's too complex. You look at it, it's that thick. It needs to be thinned down. But there are elements of it that we need to make sure that we retain. The green zone is there for a reason. It's to protect the countryside. I don't want to see creep into the countryside. I think we need to be really, really careful around that. But there are things I think we can do to help. We've had applications in from farmers to diversify, such as farm holiday lets, for example, which have been turned down, which is totally ridiculous. You know, we want visitors to come to the island. They're looking for different things to do. So I think we've got to be more supportive of some of the industries like farming and some of the things that they're trying to provide. In terms of zero-hour contracts, I don't particularly like them. I prefer they were contracts, but I think they fit some islanders' lifestyles because they're flexible. But they're overused, and I think we need to really think very carefully how we deal with them in future. I've had some of them in the parish. We've moved away from them and we've gone to full contracts, and that's what I prefer to see if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now move to Christina Moore.
Thank you for the questions. I mentioned the island plan in my speech earlier and the idea of having parish plans, because I do appreciate how difficult it can be to fulfil all the needs of our communities and also see that everybody lives harmoniously next door to each other. Just in St Peter recently, we've all become aware, I'm sure, of the difficulties of the light industrial estate in the heart of the village and the disruption that some residents feel that causes to their home lives. And so that's why I think that it is essential that we have a parish-based approach whereby through consultation parishioners can agree and decide upon where these sites could be. And if there's difficulty, they can also help to alleviate some of those difficulties as well, because we do need to have light industrial sites. Some of them are very successful around the island, but I appreciate that they can be very difficult to get hold of. And so perhaps it could be agreed amongst states members that every parish should allocate a small parcel of land towards light industrial sites. But then that means also that businesses perhaps need to be more collaborative in their approach to working with each other and agreeing how they can use sites also. We see with Digital Jersey a hub type effect where incubators happen and people work together when they're starting out on their own, and that helps them to grow as businesses and move on and progress into larger businesses and successful ones too, which neatly moves on to the issue of 0 hours contracts. I do appreciate that there's a need for flexibility sometimes on both sides, the employer and the employee, but we do need to ensure that there is a contract between those two parties, that it is a deal that suits them both and meets their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind you that Anthony Lewis will be answering the questions online on his Facebook, and I assume you can look that up if you're interested later on. If we can move to candidate number 1, Sam MEZEC, please.
On the island plan, and I know this is wishful thinking, but you would hope that common sense would dictate policy on this, because there is a balance to be struck between allowing businesses to thrive and also protecting our environment. And I'm not going to stand here and say that I think businesses should be able to just do whatever they want and build on green zones without any limits. And I'm also not going to stand here and say that I think that we should let anybody just destroy historic buildings when a lot of them are often part of our heritage and part of what makes Jersey special. But we have to let people invest in their properties so that these properties are usable and efficient. And we've all heard stories of really ridiculous examples. Double glazing is one of the obvious ones where people aren't allowed to install that. And that's something that actually encourages people to let their buildings become derelict and unusable so that they eventually just get knocked down. So we've got to have common sense in here and let people invest in their properties. On zero hours contracts, this was a huge issue at the last election, and since then, virtually nothing has been done. The only thing that has been done was the proposition that I brought to get exclusivity clauses in zero hours contracts banned because they are exploitative. End of story. There is no justification for their existence. Reform Jersey pledges to regulate zero hours contracts through the Jersey Advisory and Conciliation Service so that employees who are on zero hours contracts that are exploitative can go and get them forced to be changed into regular contracts. That's in the short term. In the longer term, I think we need to look at moving away from them altogether. There are perfectly viable alternatives like minimum hours contracts, like flexi contracts, and there are countries around the world which manage fine without zero hours contracts. We would manage fine as well. And there are some really disgusting examples I've seen of their use in the island, particularly with carers, who end up getting put on 14-hour shifts but only paid for 8 hours because they spend some of that travelling when they're meant to be looking after vulnerable people. That's totally wrong. And if I'm elected, I promise you that I will put issues to do with low pay and insecure work to the top of my agenda.
Thank you. If we can now move on to GINO, thanks.
The two questions actually are somewhat related. The island plan, well, it's okay looking 20 years ahead, but you know what is real? What we do today. Every function we do today is important, and tomorrow tends to look after itself. Now, one of the difficulties for people starting is the endless red tape you have to deal with when you employ someone, when you lease a property. When you lease a property, you on paper leases, you're asked to leave after 9 years unless you pay an extortionate rent. You know, the commercial leases need to be completely changed, and I understand that business. I move round now to zero-hour contracts. Being 68, I've got some hindsight. Maternity pay, paternity pay were all delivered by large institutions that were tempting young mothers to come back to work. Come and work for me. I freely offer you these incentives. Now, what happened was, after a few years, the civil service said, well, if it's good enough for them, we'd like it as well. But notice, it's not their money, it's taxpayers' money. Then, few years down the line, okay, the unions say, well, if it's good enough for you, well, I want it written in law for me. Well, let me tell you an absolute fact here. There is no guarantees in life, right? The sooner you get that, the better. Zero-hour contracts, never had a contract in my life, never been unemployed. When you want to leave work, you're free to leave. When I want you to leave, I must be free to allow you to leave. Minimum wage, right? Holiday money, notice period. That's it. Paternity, maternity, look to your government to
thank you very much.
And pay your taxes to pay for it.
Thank you. We can now move on to Frank Luce.
Alan, you had a host of questions, wanting a host of answers. And the Ireland Plan, what is the Ireland Plan? Does anybody know what the Ireland Plan is? Has anybody here read the Ireland Plan? Does anybody understand what the Ireland Plan is? I most certainly don't know what the Ireland Plan is. It should be something that should be held in consultation with the public of the island. These documents should not be done in isolation. They should be done in conjunction with the people of the island so that we all know what we're talking about. As for small businesses, in an island plan, my island plan, as a government, I would introduce some more trading estates. Whether they be in St Mary's or whether they be in St Helier, I would have some more trading estates. We've got one effective trading estate, BRÉE. We've got a small double here in St Peter's Technical Park, but we should have some more trading estates which are owned by the states of Jersey and can either be sold off or can be built onto by private people. But we should keep these businesses in collective areas around the island. Zero contracts, well, zero contracts, fine. It's a case of who's applying the zero contract and what the job is. They have a place in life, but really where they are being used to manipulate and extortion, they should be stopped. But certainly, yes, a balance in everything. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. If we can have John Lafondre.
Zero-hour contracts, a lot's been said. We do need to continue to allow them as far as I'm concerned, because some people do want to benefit from them and do want them. However, even within the wider bounds of the states, I've come across anomalies. Some have been referred to already. So abuse should be clamped down, but we need to retain the flexibility. So it's a bit of a 50-50 response. Island plan. I'm very sympathetic to the comments the gentleman was making, particularly around small business, light industry, bad neighbours, if you like, and luxury development versus first-time buyer. I think one of the key themes that's come out is consultation is going to be critical when the new island plan comes. It's been one of the themes we've had in scrutiny, actually, that government has not been doing good and effective consultation or meaningful consultation. This is something we have got to get right on the island plan. It's got to be genuine and sincere. As a guide, on the last time round, I have read the island plan. I brought about 8 amendments, which included trying to improve noise insulation, minimum size standards, seeking to put in a bridle path, footpath and cycle path network around the island, policies around housing, and removing subjectivity, because there's some certain points we've touched on where it is not clear and it can be interpreted in a number of ways. I've been an applicant and an objector at various times, and each time it has not been easy. So I think one of the key things for the future plan is the assumptions around population are key as to whether that plan is going to be effective or not. One of the reasons we are seeing pressures now is that we've let in 4,000 people in the last 4 years when it should have been 1,300. And in a very brief comment, I do believe that buildings should be capable of being changed to address modern standards of insulation and glazing. They cannot stay in aspic. I do caveat that with sort of, heritage and all that type of thing, but buildings need to be lived in and used by the current generation and fit for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, can we have Ian Gorson?
The island plan, just to clarify, is a land use document, and it is driven by planning. And therein is the start of the problem. Because it is a planning and rules-based document, but with lots of flexibility, with lots of very detailed policies underneath. And in the civil service restructuring, we are proposing to take that planning and connect it with all of the planning that happens in the states. And the reason is the current planning process doesn't really look at the economy. It simply looks at land use, and therefore small businesses, start-up businesses, agricultural businesses, they really struggle to have their voice heard. I have supported a small cider producer, even businesses in the country like the zoo are struggling to get their voice heard, so I've supported them this week. I have supported some people with historic homes, not all of them, some of them, no doubt we're going to get that question, some of them, because it's got to be, buildings have got to be lived in and they've got to be made suitable for the modern age. So we've got to change where we do it and how we do it. At the same time, I'm a great believer in the Australian system of planning, where you get building control and you get planning together, and you know right at the start, roughly, you go through a process, and therefore you're not spending tens of thousands of pounds all the time to just get to know and get to know and get to know, and you've no idea where you are. So there's a lot of change to be delivered. 0 hours contracts, they have got uses. Jacks have got a policy for the good use of them. They should not be used inappropriately. It sounds to me from the questioner, if somebody is on a 45-hour week and that week is happening every week, that's an abuse, and they should be stopped for that purpose.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. We're now looking for 2 more questions from the audience. Okay, so we can have the lady at the front here. Down at the front, Hannah. Oh.
Good evening. Landlords are refusing to rent to families with kids. The law has been agreed that it's going to be brought in, but it's not yet been written. Families are being made homeless. I'd like to know first, where exactly do you want the registered children's families to live? Secondly, families are unable to find decent, affordable accommodation at rent to kids. It's totally inhumane, disgusting behaviour. I think Jersey people doing this should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And are you prepared to abolish quals so that there's immediate homes available to families with kids?
Okay, and we'll take one more question. Take the gentleman right at the very back there in the blue jumper. Oh, that's great.
Hi. Many of the people in front of us tonight are going to end up in charge of very large departments, potentially. Some of the biggest departments in the States, I understand, potentially spend, what, 200, 300 million a year. Is that right, Chief Minister? So what I'm interested in is really for all those candidates who aren't currently in charge of a very significant department, what is the biggest budget that you have been in charge of? Are you capable of leading a big organisation like a department of our government? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to summarise, the first question that we're looking to answer for is basically affordable rental for families, and then how young families and with children are able to find rental accommodation that they can afford. I think is roughly what you're looking for, and the sort of the restrictions with the private landlords and everything. And then the second question is primarily probably to the members who haven't controlled large budgets before, how they will actually continue to do this. I suppose for the guys that already have, how they will maybe manage those more effectively going forward. And we'll start with number 12, Well, Scott.
Thank you. So, I've actually heard some horrible stories about families who are here with children, the lower paid people. I've even heard about 3 children who were found living in a shed. And that distresses me. I don't feel that is really what we should, well, that should be tolerated or expected in Jersey. We've had this problem. It's been caused by this immigration that's exceeded the quotas. We haven't actually had a way of managing it. We haven't foreseen it. And what you're basically saying is, how can we clear up the mess instantly? I can't see how we can without the help of the voluntary sector, without really identifying clearly who needs help and ensuring that the social security departments are actually really getting in there. And if that's not happening, I personally will want to know why. And I don't have the answers, but if elected, I'll find out why. The health spend, 200 million. Well, I was in a legal partnership. I'm not actually allowed to say how much we earned, but let's say it was more than $1 million, because we did actually employ 800 employees worldwide. That actually cost a lot as well. And they were great. It was great teamwork. Yeah, I do know something about managing budgets. I was described as top-notch in finance in a legal publication. So if your concern is that you may have candidates who don't know how to manage budget, please don't worry about me. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move on to Gordon Troy.
Housing is a huge issue here at the moment, and we're going to have great difficulty finding homes for everybody while we're not building new homes. It's just a case of Jersey has to get on with this and supply more and more homes so that people buy, there's more rentable become available, and this whole housing situation is very difficult. But it's not going to be, it's a case of supply and demand. Until we can solve the demand, it's just going to be very, very difficult. Just going on to your question, I mean, for myself, I have been in business pretty much all my life. Probably the biggest budgets I've looked after is where I've sat on financial committees for Lloyd's Bowmaker Finance, in control of lending money to substantial companies, institutions and individuals. But I don't think that is particularly, I don't think you should consider that as important, because we need all kinds of people in government. You know, we need the old, the young. You know, we need the rich, the poorer. We need able, disabled. It's about, government is about getting everybody and using their talents in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move to Tracy Valois now.
Okay, thank you for your questions. In terms of abolishing quals, I wouldn't at this point in time. I think everyone has spoken about work permits and how our immigration system works or doesn't work, and everyone's got a different idea of how it may or may not work. So I think if there is a plan to move towards a permit system, then the qualification system would have to be looked at alongside those permit systems to determine the most appropriate way to put in a proper population or immigration system. So at this moment in time, I wouldn't abolish quals, but I would look at it alongside the permit system that everybody else has been talking about. And in terms of the biggest budget I've been in charge of, firstly, I've not run my own business. I have worked in finance. I have run business accounts from small, medium businesses to big, large international corporations. Technically, I was Assistant Minister at Treasury, so the whole of the state's budget. And my household budget, not that it's that big, and I've been Assistant Minister at Education. I mean, I deal with various different budgets. I've got a financial background, but I haven't run my own business, and I haven't, you know, all those types of things. So as clear as I can get.
Thank you. We can move on to Steve at Pallet.
I think in regards to families and ensuring that that families have got the right to good accommodation. I think we've got legislation on the way. It's not been through Privy Council yet. But I think housing controls, I think we need to have a look at that and review that to ensure that people that are arriving in the island get the opportunity to access decent accommodation. Affordable rental properties, I know caps have been mentioned. I don't think that's a sensible way forward, and I think it's very difficult to do. I wouldn't abolish qualifications. I think they're there for a purpose. We need a migration policy. I think that's clear, and I think we need it early on in the next political term. We need to limit the growth of the population. That's been clear. I think we can do that through work permits. So that I think there's mechanisms there to ensure that we can keep the population under control. In regards to budgets, I've never been in charge of a £200 million health budget, and I don't particularly want to be. But I've overseen the sports department over the last 3.5 years. It's got a budget of £5 to £6 million, both on facilities and operational, and I've been involved in that very closely in regard to some of the changes that have been made. There's been a lot of changes within the sports department over that period of time that have meant jigging around with budgets and making sure that we keep within that budget. And there's also been CSR during that period where we've had to make budget cuts. So I think it's been really important that I've had a close connection to that. In terms of the parish, it's another £1.6 million budget. That's scrutinised, I think, to the nth degree by parishioners each year. So you can't get away with spending anything in a parish without being very closely scrutinised. Personally, the biggest budget I've ever done in terms of my own business is probably around about £300,000 a year. Not a huge budget, but it's something that was personal to me, and I had to ensure was run in a very professional way, and something I was very proud of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can now move on to KRISTINA Moore.
Thank you. The issue of housing supply has been something that we've wrestled with for many, many years, and it is always an issue of supply. I'm aware at the moment that it's not just the registered sector of the rental market that is struggling to fulfil supply, it's also the entitled sector as well. That's why we need to create more affordable homes. We need more supply in all parts of the economy so that they can release homes for other people to take them on. And so that's one of the reasons why I found it very hard to understand why it was deemed that the need hadn't been proven for the affordable homes in St Peter, because to me it's very clear that there is a desperate need for additional housing in sensible sites. And it was, as far as the parishioners of St Peter were concerned, the right site for the right project, and it would have given 65 families homes. Another example would be that of the police station. We spend an awful lot of time arguing about where buildings should go, and actually we don't think enough about the end point and what the outcome of that indecision is, because there are 75 homes due to be built shortly on the Summerland site, and those homes would be finished by now if we hadn't spent so long arguing over the police station site. So we need greater clarity, more supply, and that will hopefully solve our problems, and also managed immigration as well. Moving on to budgets very quickly, I've had the Home Affairs portfolio for the past term, which is a 50 million and decreasing budget. We've managed to successfully reduce that slightly. It was the biggest budget I had overseen in my time, other than small investment companies and a household budget as well. But politicians are policy makers, essentially, and we're there to shape the direction, so you need people of all backgrounds.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a reminder that Anthony Lewis will be answering these questions on Facebook, and if we can now move back to Sam MEZEC, thank you.
On housing, let's be clear about this, the housing market in Jersey is broken. Home ownership is out of reach for far too many islanders, and a large proportion of the public are in rental stress, which means they're spending more than a third of their income on putting a roof above their head. Many of those people spending over half of their income. The fact is that the market in Jersey works in the interests of investors and not in the interests of people who need a home. And some candidates have already said that the answer to this is all about supply. And they're wrong. It's about something much more complicated than just supply, because it doesn't matter how many new homes we build in Jersey if they're all bought by foreign investors who just want to funnel money out of the island in rent, or if they are sold to landlords who put restrictive clauses on them on who can and can't live in there. The answer is regulation, and I know some people think, oh, red tape, that's never a good thing. In this instance, it's essential, because we need to create a level playing field where ordinary people can afford to rent a home. Some of them might want to be able to save up so that they can afford a mortgage eventually, and I think that the answer to that is regulation, so we can stop some of the practices that are going on in the market. In terms of budget, I'm 27 years old. I'm the youngest candidate on here. I'm not going to tell you that I've got all sorts of great business experience, because I would be lying. The extent of my experience is in relatively small things that I've had control over the budget for, certain parish things where I work with other people with a budget. The biggest budget I've been in charge of is probably my household budget. I'm sorry to say this, but I think the question misses the point. If we had a States Assembly made up of 49 accountants with financial expertise, I'm sorry, but the states would be even more dysfunctional than it currently is. For a democracy to work, the Parliament must look like the people it represents. We have to have a breadth of experience and values in there. I'm not selling myself on my experience. I'm trying to sell myself on my values, which is that I love my island, I'm a team player, and I want to work to make ordinary people's lives better. And my vote in the States, where I will be one of 49, will always be in the interest of ordinary people. Financial prudency, yes, of course, but it's the values that I think matter more than experience.
Thank you. We can now move to GINO.
First of all, when I came here more than 30 years ago, I understood the housing laws. So it actually took me 20 years before I could officially rent and buy in the open market. So you know that before you come here. But whilst you're here, it is important to keep housing, home costs down. Now, the only way that I can see that done effectively is Andean Homes build homes not to sell, but to rent, and those houses must be rented at affordable rents where manual workers and skilled manual workers can afford to have a home. Simple as that. Now, that downward pressure, I would reduce rents by about 30%. The downward pressure would put pressure on the private market to come down. Now, the other issue was touched on, share transfer to people who live outside of the island. Stop that. All you're doing is introducing more buyers and shoving up the price of property. And that's what these people here allow. Right, let's get to accounting. Oh, yes, I love accounts. You know what accounts is? Adding up figures. Well, if you can't add up, you shouldn't be on this bench. But let me tell you, on this island, they have accounting methods that wouldn't be fit for purpose in any Western democracy. Now, what you've got to ask yourself with an island full of accountants and lawyers, now, why is this? Now, why is this? It's very simple. So I'll give it to you again. Unless you are the accountant scrutinising government spending online, nothing changes. Now, I want you to heed this. Government accountability is everything. The money must be first.
Thank you. So if we can now move to Frank Luce.
Right. Affordable housing, affordable rentals. The only control that can be put on property, whether it be for sale or for rental, is states' housing, where the states have a control, they've built it, and they can control the rentals of the units that they have. When it comes to private property, you have landlords, and you cannot control a landlord. You cannot have any legislation which will control a landlord. If a landlord doesn't want to rent his property or sell his property, he doesn't. It's as simple as that. If he won't get a proper return on his property, he will not rent it. It's as simple as that. So the only control that you can have on property per se is states' housing, where there is a direct government control. Unfortunately, it's expensive to live over here, and people who come over here must realise that. Wages are fairly high. Property is always going to be a problem. It'll never go away. I've been an estate agent for 43 years, and this problem was here in 1975 when I started, and is still here today. It's down to the government to control their units, and in that way you can get some reasonable rents. When it comes to budgets and controlling budgets, our present government, through various health ministers, has managed to sign off £26 million in finding a hospital site. And this has all been approved by the Chief Minister. So don't talk to me about budgeting. At the end of the day, budgeting... Yeah. What is the biggest budget you've had? Well, I've had my own business for 43 years, and that hasn't been anywhere near the health department's budgets, but I most certainly wouldn't waste £26 million on finding a hospital site.
Okay, thanks very much. We can move to John LaFondre.
Thank you. Oddly enough, both of these questions are ones I've actually answered in a video clip on Vote JE, if you want a slightly more concise answer. And actually, the questions asked us in St Peter's about certain things. I certainly commented on the external buy-to-let situation, which I think is something that's going to need addressing. In terms of discrimination against families, absolutely, I don't like that. But actually, there is a balance as well between the rights of the landlord and the rights of the tenant. And I speak on that as a trustee of a social landlord. And so, for example, you might have circumstances where you have a building which has mainly got elderly people in it, and it may not be appropriate to mix. And in other words, you've got to balance those competing pressures. But as a principle, you shouldn't be discriminating. If we abolish QALYs, the population will increase far more than we've got now. So short answer is no, not without another system being in place. About me, there's quite a bit on the back of my leaflet, so thank you very much for this question. I'm also a bit cautious, given the calibre of certain people in this room, about commenting on the merits of accountants or not, but I'm an accountant. Yeah. And I do agree it would be terrible to have an assembly full of accountants, but I do think it is important that people are numerate, because you are dealing with complex decisions often. Background-wise, where do you start? Got a family business. I used to be also an assistant minister in Treasury, so I used to look after the entire property holdings portfolio, which in value is somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion. As an accountant, I qualified at Ernst & Young. Used to look after clients in the top 500. On the Housing Trust, we look after just about 350 units of accommodation. We're presently doing Troy Court, which is a £12 million rebuild, and we've got other various projects on acquisitions, which are in several £1 million. And I hope that gives you a general flavour that I do think I'm financially qualified for some of the decisions we make. May not always get them right, mind you. Thank you.
Thank you. We can now move to Ian Gores.
Thank you. Of course, I could talk about affordable housing and rents and all of those things, but I think at the heart of your question was the question about qualifications. And over a number of years, probably about 7 years ago, they came down gradually from 20 to 10. And this has been one of those social questions that we found very difficult to get to grips with. The Care Inquiry and the Children's Commissioner now, with the work that she's been doing with children and young people, is raising this up the political agenda. And I have got no magic bullet for it, just like no other candidate here this evening has either. We've sort of tried to avoid the question, but I do believe that we are going to have to consider it. It can only happen attached to some other mechanism, because we don't want unintended immigration to come because of it, but it is the qualification period that's leading people to be in substandard but expensive accommodation, and that has got to change. Budgets. I'm an accountant. I apologise for that. I did work for a fund management and administration company. The budgets and the size of the funds there were considerably larger than the state's budget. I'll say it before Ivor does. Perhaps it's time I went back and did that again. But what we have rightly done is put a new accountability framework in place. We now will have a single accountable officer. That is the new chief executive. He will delegate down accountable functions for all of the state's budgets to other senior officials. If they don't behave properly, if they don't manage that money efficiently on behalf of islanders, that delegation will be taken away, and we're going to start once and for all to get to grips with managing that budget more efficiently, more effectively on behalf of islanders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we can now move to Lyndon Farnham.
Thank you. To house families, we do need to work harder to match supply with demand. And that's about, as I alluded to in my opening address, building new homes, facilitating moving people waiting for affordable housing into that sector to free up rental accommodation, and managing immigration much better. I think we're all committed to doing that. Help to Buy schemes are important as well. And about qualifications, that's been the way we've controlled or tried to control immigration for decades. The thing is, it's created a two-tier market. I would love to see a one-tier market where everything is fairer, so everybody can enjoy better standards of housing, but I'm not quite sure how we achieve that. But we are committed and we are moving in that direction. Regulation tends not to help, it tends to reduce the supply of housing. What is the bigger? Well, I retired from most of my business interests in 2011 when I was elected as a senator. I've been in business for about 30 years. I was a managing director of a company. We had a turnover in the region of 50 million, employed over 400 staff, and it kept me awake at night, I can tell you that much. My economic development budget was 22 million. It's now 18 million after 3 years. And we have managed to establish Visit Jersey, establish Events Jersey, produce a new rural economy established Farm Jersey to promote the agricultural sector internationally, and worked with my colleague, Constable of St Brelard, who has established a Jersey sport. So we've managed to reduce our budget by almost 4 million and do some pretty positive things. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now move to Gerard Bowden.
Thank you. Affordable rental, this is quite a wide issue. We used to have work permits, obviously, in a 20-year qualification period. That's been whittled down over the years, and the result has been a lot of people coming to the island, immigration, and that has caused a housing shortage. A shortage always causes an increase in price. An increase in cost of the property means an increase in rent. So, in other words, reducing these qualifications has in fact caused higher rents, and as others have said, you can't just simply knock them down, because then the landlord will not rent out the property, it'll take it off the market. And there's one thing we need to be careful of here. If we're all wishing for lower house prices, be careful what you wish for, because that could cause negative equity, and that'll mean a lot of families will lose their property as the bank calls in the amount no longer, the equity no longer covers the loan. Now, biggest budget I've been in charge of, well, I ran my own business for 40 years. I suppose the biggest project was about £750,000. But we mustn't confuse here the issue. The job of politicians is not to manage projects. That's the job of the departmental chief officers, who, in my opinion, are not always up to the job, and this is where I'm hoping that the public sector reform, which is underway, is going to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can move on to Simon Bree.
Thank you very much. Firstly, the problem with the private rental market. I fully accept and understand there is a problem. I've been speaking to people who are paying up to 2/3 of their income on rental. That can't be right. The problem lies with, unfortunately, the supply and demand that we've got in the private market. Would I abolish qualifications? No, I would not. Not at the moment. We need to look at this. I think the responsibility lies with government. Government needs to re-evaluate its relationship with Andium and the way in which it provides social housing, particularly to people with young families who can't buy their own house. It needs to be affordable housing for anybody. You cannot have people spending 2/3 of their income purely on rental. So a lot more work needs to be done on that relationship. What is the biggest budget I've been in charge of? I've worked for 25 years in the finance industry. I ended up as the local head of an investment banking operation. Personally, I was looking after a £1 billion loan portfolio, and I'm a fully qualified member of the International Capital Markets Association, used to be known as the Association of International Bond Dealers. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can now move to Phil Maguire.
Well, demand outstrips supply, and supply just cannot keep up with it, then the casualties will be the renters, because they'll just be considered to be commodities, because if they can't afford it, somebody else will. So the problem is, until we get our immigration under control, we're not going to get our renting under control. It's as simple as that. As far as qualifications are concerned, I'd like to see them subsumed into the work permit. If somebody gets a work permit, they should be then allowed to rent whatever they can, wherever they want, without any restrictions. As far as government is concerned, one of my clients was the MOD, where the price of 200 million will buy you one plane. So it's not exactly a frightening amount. Ironically, I have no interest, if I ever get elected, in becoming a minister. I think where the rubber hits the road is in scrutiny. Scrutiny needs to be muscled up. Scrutiny needs to take their job more seriously about calling our government into account.
Thank you. We can move to Sarah Ferguson.
Thank you. Affordable rentals, as has already been said, demand is much higher than supply because of the level of immigration. So, you know, the immigration policy that is proposed is actually underpinning everything that, and all the strategies and policies that a new government should be looking at. But part of the problem is that a couple of sessions ago, social rentals were put up to 90% of market rentals. But if you look at the amount of housing that is controlled by Andium and the trusts, they're actually making the market. So you're going round in circles, you're putting the price up to 90% of the market with the housing supply that is the market. And then the private rental people, the private landlords, follow the state's social rental housing. You know, when the states put rentals up, then the private people put it up too. So we're in a bit of a sort of going around in circles on that one. Abolishing qualifications, no, we can't afford to, because we can't afford to increase the amount of immigration, I'm afraid, at the moment. That's unfortunately, that's realistic. As far as budgets go, I actually am an engineer with a master's degree in business from Columbia University in New York. When I was doing my apprenticeship, I worked in an environment where 10p of works money was treated with the same care as £1 of my own. And you can rest assured that I do the same with taxpayers' money.
Thank you. And if we can finally move to Stevie Ocean.
Good evening again. Madam, what parish do you live in? Right, okay. I'm going to go back to case files here. When I was chairman of the Jersey Rights Association and its founder and its chairman back in the 80s, early 90s, I'm going to tell you something now which might shock you. Okay, I went round to a house, I'm not going to tell you where this guy was living there. He was paying £100 a week. He had no bed, and I found that he was hung in his bedroom. Now, that's to give you some example of the way things are. On the point of qualifications, you take qualifications away from this island, you know, I have refugees here like the rest of the world. Do you want that? Because that's exactly what would happen. That is the only thing that is actually stopping them coming here. Do you understand? No, you don't understand. I've just explained to you about the other side of things, about the way that road landlords work. Unfortunately, until we can get control over road landlords, we can't do anything about it. Look, if somebody has a house, love, and they want to rent it out, it is down to that person. It is not... How can you say it's discrimination? If you have a house here and you want to rent it out to somebody, how can it be discrimination? Yeah, but that's down to their prerogative if they want to do that. And what about if they say they don't want pets there? It's a very difficult situation, I'm sorry, but that's as much as we get. It's not excuses from us here at all. Far from it, okay? Thank you very much. I don't deserve a round of applause, but I made a good point there.
Okay, thank you very much for answering all the questions. I think maybe, hopefully everybody's had a good evening, and you maybe like to thank the candidates for their informing you of their objectives and goals while they become senators. If you'd like to maybe thank them for the evening, and we can call it an evening.